any organization moving to SAP RISE, they need to have a project manager. They need to bring that, and that person will have a lot on their plate to understand the services that are going to be provided, how to collaborate the different teams, and how to engage all the different parts of the organization to bring on board when needed and provide the information and all of that. So that amount of work should not be underestimated.
Welcome to the Tekitok podcast, where we embark on a journey through the ever-evolving realm of SAP and IT operations, automation, artificial intelligence, and cloud technologies. Whether you're an IT professional, a business leader, or simply curious about emerging technologies and industry insights, our episodes will be your compass in navigating this dynamic landscape with real-world experiences. Join us as we demystify complex concepts, explore innovative trends, and engage in stimulating dialogue with industry experts to empower you with insights that matter. The views expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the opinions of their respective companies. The producer of this Tekitok podcast assumes no responsibility for any public content, ideas, or recommendations shared.
Welcome to another episode of Tekitok. We've been already a couple of episodes talking about SAP RISE, the services that they provide, the infrastructure, what it is, and I think we're ready to go one click down on that and go to implementation and what activities are included in the implementation, what any organization moving to SAP RISE should be looking for, and hopefully we provide some good information to anyone planning or think about moving to SAP RISE. So have a few folks today. Andrew, Lynn, Pierfrancesco, and Michael, welcome. And let's just get started with a implementation. When I think of implementation, I always think of who's managing this? Who's going to run the implementation of this? Because I have. I'm moving to SAP RISE, I'm moving to the cloud, I'm already in the cloud working with AWS directly. Now I understand that I will be working with SAP and SAP RISE, but I need to migrate my data, I need to migrate my interfaces, and I need to migrate all the other stuff. So who's managing this? Let's maybe clarify that in the SAP RISE world.
Yeah, maybe I can take a stab first. And I mean, I think that's a good point to start. I think when we talk about cloud, we need to make a distinction here that SAP RISE, although might be using AWS or Azure, it's a different service provider from how you would normally work with AWS or Azure, for example. It's SAP's way of managing SAP systems, although it might be utilizing the technology of Amazon and RISE or Azure in the backend. It's not the same relationship. You're not having a relationship with AWS to manage your SAP systems. You're having a relationship with SAP RISE to manage the system and also the infrastructure. So I think that's a distinction that we need to sort of understand at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that there's expectations might be skewed a little bit because they tend to say RISE is all in one package where you could just do it and we handle everything for you. But I think really when you do a deeper dive and you go, not my experience with clients is that we've had a lot of clients say, hey, should we go with RISE or what are we going to do? What's really involved in this? And I've had many of them actually stay native because they saw how overwhelming it was going to be. And, as easy as they say, SAP says it's going to be implemented and it's all, in one box for you and we're going to run everything for you. There's a lot of stuff in the background for customers, that they don't realize up front until unless they have a proper discovery and workshop up front to really go through.
Yeah, I really think this discovery is the key, because SAP RISE will know what they need to be the landing system so they can manage and operate that environment. Your customer doesn't know that, but SAP RISE doesn't know the customer either. And I'm not sure they don't care, but they're like, hey, we don't know what we don't know. You need to bring that knowledge to the table and work that together. And I think that's a tricky part of this implementation, right? That everybody knows just a little bit.
So it sounds like you need a big project manager to me. Sounds like from experiences of various go lives with RISE, right? I think the customer, I mean, I'm just looking at this. This is actual RISE document, right? Everything above from additional services out to standard is basically SAP responsibility, and optional you want them to do something, right? So they're really just responsible for this layer. If you want them to take care of these layers, you have to basically sign up for it. So looks like a lot of project implementation work is on the customer. So I would say customer has to do the project management, as because most of the tasks from business and integration and planning for sizing and everything, customer, I mean, I'm sure SAP is going to say, we give you a sizing template, you need to figure out all the questions and size it properly, right? So but project implementation, it seems to me, you're not going to, just because you go to RISE, you do away with your, project management office and all that, right? So am I correct? Maybe Pierfrancesco or Andrew, I think you guys have been through some of this.
For our experience is that the implementation of the RISE, the project, the export of the project can be a little bit tricky, because you have to take care about the real size of your environment, your SAP environment, and if happens that you make the sizing wrong, this can be a problem, because you cannot move, you cannot change your size quickly. Every change to the environment size should be follow a complete workflow of sales agreement and so on. So our experience is that during the project itself, you take care about the right size of your virtual machine, in order to make the export works fine, make the export finalized. Another point of attention is the rigidity about this kind of model, because even during the project you do not have any physical contact or physical reference, and you can talk, you can relate with SAP support only only with a ticket system, and follow the service level agreement of the contract you signed. This is a couple of attention point I want to highlight.
Francesco, can we see on the topic of project management? I think you brought two key aspects. One is the sizing, and then collaboration, access to SAP RISE team, ticketing system. I think those are two key points that I want to touch base in a bit more detail. So is that fair with everyone? I'd like to just, from a project management standpoint, seems like any organization moving to SAP RISE, they need to have a project manager. They need to bring that, and that person will have a lot on their plate to understand the services that are going to be provided, how to collaborate the different teams, and how to engage all the different parts of the organization to bring on board when needed and provide the information and all of that. So that amount of work should not be underestimated.
Right. I actually have some real experience with a customer who actually had both. They had a typical, cloud that they manage their own SAP systems. And then through acquisitions or new business requirement, they decide to implement some on RISE with a secure RISE environment. It seems when that happened on the project management side, there was a bit of, I guess you have to adjust your expectation because the customer use agile methodology. So when you come to SAP implementation, we all used to some system integrator. They all bring their methodology for implementation. Right? SAP has Activate. So when we talk about implementation, we have to get together all the different team players and then agree on an implementation methodology, and even down to the tooling. If you're using Azure DevOps or you're using Jira to manage a project or just standard Microsoft project plan, if the other party doesn't actually use that system, how do you add, let's say, a person onto Azure DevOps environment, assign them a task? Because they're not going to see it, right? It's not like, oh, this task needs to be done something, but actually it's a ticket. So you don't have a resource you put to it, you put a ticket to it. So even I think for project planning, project management, it seems very important to agree upfront, maybe in the pre-launch phase, what are the tooling involved to drive this project, and who are the escalation points, who are the steering committee, etc. But I think that's important because project isn't just about doing work, right? It's about planning to do the work, right?
Yeah, good point. Pierfrancesco mentioned about the sizing, and I think it's a key important aspect because there are considerations of moving to SAP RISE and constraints that you're going to end up with, managing availability, scaling out, all those things that could be new to anybody moving to SAP RISE, and I think deserves some conversation here. Anybody wants to jump on that?
I think the biggest thing about understanding from sizing and your ability to upsize or increase sizing based on needs. If you have past experience with working directly with AWS or Azure, then you probably have an understanding or an expectation of how you might be able to do that. Whether it's you can go directly into the console and you can just simply increase sizing and cost is done by consumption. That's a different mechanism. So I think what everyone needs to understand, I think with RISE, is that ability to request and make additional increase in hardware sizing is a different mechanism. It has a different time frame. It has a different process and a different workflow, as Pierfrancesco was taking. So you need to factor in how that works, so that if you need to have a bigger server or have increase your sizing, that you figure out that workflow and the time to do that is different than what you might have working directly with someone like Amazon or Azure.
So interestingly, I just saying that I was highlighting that this is actually SAP highlight as optional service, right? So if you need to scale anything, storage, compute. So let's say not only the system, but the storage. Maybe my database I have on premise, I don't know, Oracle. I'm going to HANA. The storage estimate only, right? Not until you land, you know exactly how much it's gonna take storage-wise, because there's compression and all that stuff. So I mean, these are saying optional. I mean, you have to pay for SAP to do it, but I think sizing dictates this because you wouldn't need to scale if you got the size right, or maybe you plan for go live versus operational implementation is different than go live. My last point, and this is in a typical cloud migration, right? The architect, the SAP migration architect, is responsible for taking the source system, estimating what the cloud size for that system would be in terms of compute, storage, and network requirements. All of that is done like upfront to make sure that I am giving you the right estimate for cost to run this system in cloud. So I think that part is crucial now in RISE. I think that that model is a little bit different, because maybe I come up from a traditional cloud and I propose all of these certified instances that can work with SAP, but SAP on RISE support only 5 types, and these are the t-shirt size: small, medium, large. If I want like extra large because I have a big system, maybe that's not in the scope, and that has to be negotiated upfront, or it could be delayed during the project if you don't deal with that upfront. So that's only my takeaway from that point. Am I kind of on the right track there when I say you have to really spend the time to understand if you fall outside of those parameters? You need to plan for it ahead, not while you're implementing.
If let's say I'm an organization, I'm already in the cloud in AWS, and I'm moving to SAP RISE, which is still in the cloud and still in AWS. To me, is like I'm moving to a complete separate service. I will not manage the infrastructure in the same way. I will not do capacity in the same way. I could forget everything I know about the cloud, and I just need to learn SAP RISE. AWS, you don't need to know that.
That's a pretty good statement to sort of describe it. Yes, I would agree that you need to set new expectations. You need to understand how a new way of working. You need to have certain timeframes and workflows, and probably service requests that you need to know on how to work with RISE to do the same thing that you might know in AWS would be different, right? So it is not the same. And to ask you, and Lynn, to your question about sizing, I think sizing is we've all gone through implementations, and then we've assessed it, and then when we get there, it's for lots of number of reasons why the sizing was undersized. It could be the inefficiencies of the existing configuration that still need to be optimized. It's going to take another year to stabilize whatever you've done, and because of that, you're undersized, not because of the initial estimate of the volume, but it's just the way that everything's been set up. Your jobs are all running all at the same time, and you haven't optimized that, so it's going to take you months. So in that case, you need to probably just take the easiest option, is just to increase hardware while you work to optimize the application, which is the responsibility of the customer, right? So in that case, you then need to know, hey, I need to factor in certain amount of time to be able to just be able to upscale my capacity, my server capacity. It's not the same type of mechanism that you might have with your AWS direct experience. So as long as you plan ahead and you realize that, I think you can mitigate that.
But that seems counterintuitive. That I'm in AWS already, and I may have already some other applications, and I enjoy elasticity, adaptive computing, and all of that. Now I'm going to SAP RISE, and it's going to take time to build a new server because it's a different capacity. And it seems like I'm going backwards in the technology instead of moving forward and leveraging cloud native services.
I think that's a sacrifice for having uniformity, right? You went with the standard offering. Standard means like you don't have the flexibility anymore. To me, it is very true, because the fact is that most customer, and for us architect, like I can take a job example, right? As an architect, cloud kind of gave me the ability to move fast by implementing and estimating. I don't have to be 100% accurate. I don't even have to be 90%. I can be 60% accurate, because I can rely on the agility of just say, hey, you know what, I got this slightly wrong, so I'm just going to upsize it. It takes me 2 hours and I'm done, right? So I don't have to be spending so much time in analyzing and getting paralyzed. I can go ahead and move, and then being agile, able to adapt when the situation changes. But I think that goes away with this, is what I think from a sizing perspective, at least. You have to get it somewhat right. And if you don't, then you expect maybe one of these service level requests will, be cost analyzed, and then will take a while to implement. And so that you need to build that into the project planning.
Awesome. Just one more question about the sizing. How about the sizing for migration, which may require different sizing from regular operations, and maybe peak load that I only have once a month? And I hope that the cloud is going to facilitate, my elasticity, that once a month I have more capacity, but after that day, I only pay for what I use. Any experience and guidance we can share?
I think that's going to be more on the cloud architect to really kind of give you those services and what you're going to really need, because you got to pay as you go, right, type of offering, because you don't really know until you're like done, and then you don't really know how much you're going to need and not need. So I think that's going to be more the responsibility of a cloud architect for you to rely on those right sizings, right, for the services of whatever hyperscaler you're using.
And I don't think SAP is going to give you that, because SAP is saying you're responsible for sizing. So I think from what I hear, and I think Andrew was about to say something, but essentially my guess is that you have to ask for something big, and hopefully somewhere in the future size it back down, or maybe not. I don't know. Is that true, Andrew, from your experience?
Yeah, so I think the closest solution that I think SAP is offering right now, which is similar to our sort of understanding of how things might be working in a cloud environment with AWS, is something like BTP, where you can through their different I guess solutions that they have within BTP, they're able to disable and enable services so that you're being charged based on consumption. So if you wanted to make there's a minimum base, and if there's something that's idle, you can turn it off at night, for example, or hibernate it, and then you can save. Now, moving over to RISE, that's not necessarily the same mechanism that they have there. So once it's really more even though it might be using the foundation layer of AWS, it really is more of a sort of an application hosting, where the server is whatever servers that you have dedicated, that you're using, that you've procured and is in the contract. That's what you have. So if you need to upsize it, you need to revise your contract. If you need to downsize it, you need to wait for the contract to expire. It's not the same sort of flexibility that they currently are trying to do with BTP or other cloud services, that they are actually, I think, moving down that consumption model. So that's my understanding.
The cloud services is more of a native cloud, right? You're talking like something that you just turn on application.
Yeah.
There's no. Yeah, so that I think there's a differentiation between that and say running S/4HANA, because S/4HANA is not a cloud service. It's still an application that you run on a VM, an instance, not a true kind of SaaS offering, if you will. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they defined it as a private cloud, right? So.
Okay.
All right.
Even
so
though
this is awesome. Something else that Pierfrancesco started is reaching out during your implementation, because we're in implementation today, right? So reaching out to the SAP RISE implementation team counterpart. Can the project manager pick up the phone and say, hey, we run into this problem, we're going to go live tomorrow, but we need this to be done? How is that? Because we all been through implementations, migrations, and the rush of it. What support model does SAP RISE provide during implementation?
Yes, they share the service level agreement during the in the contract, of course. But usually, when you are running a project, you can have some different needs, and in this case, you have to wait what the service level agreement says according to your contract. If you need to perform a restart of your SAP application, you have to open the ticket and wait until the ticket would be worked. That's all. It's easy.
So if I'm gonna go live tomorrow and I'm running into problems, I will create a very high priority one type of ticket. SLA is 20 minutes. Should I expect that my consultants, or the person knowledgeable on migrating me is going to reach out to me, or that's going to be somebody else that just got the ticket and doesn't know anything about my plan, my migration, and my challenges? And do we know any feedback on that?
I don't I cannot answer to this because I do not have this kind of experience directly, but
Okay.
I think it depends. Yeah, you can only open the ticket and they will reply and answer according to your contract. I think they do not have shared with the application people the plan. I am not sure about this, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
I
what
think
I
I
could
understand that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's the expectation, I think, with SAP is really trying to make make everything a la carte, meaning everything needs to, they're trying their very best to put down all the necessary tasks into service requests so that they can be completed by their back-end support teams. And the front-facing people that that are working with really just manage we're like managing the tickets so that it gets completed by their teams in the back ends. Now, the challenge, I think, when you start talking about when you're getting really close to go live dates and so on, I think there's some nuances where they can, you can start to reach out and have calls where you can work directly with the project team. But in essence, the project team is going to translate and create tickets in the back end to get the work done by their teams in the back. So it's always going to be through that mechanism. I think this way it helps them to not only commoditize the work package to be distributed amongst different teams, I guess from a capacity planning perspective. But of course, this is from a project perspective. If you have a tight delivery time frame and you need quick responses and you need the face-to-face contact to troubleshoot potential issues that are arising that may be new and you can't define, it is a bit challenging. So you need to factor in a lot of time and testing to be able to make sure that you can respond and then troubleshoot and resolve and then try it again. But if you're really under those tight deadlines, it is challenging to work under that mechanism because you are working through you're not working directly with the team that is performing the tasks.
So it's kind of true that you can't put a name on a project task, on a project plan that is associated. I mean, a lot of this, what I see is like all of these main, what they call service clusters, things that are normally what happens during go live. You might have different teams dealing with data, integration, operations, monitoring, release management. All of these are really what typically in a big project, SAP traditionally, an implementation partner would take care of most of these, and you would have a project lead for each of those areas, right? But in this case, it's just to say as customer, right? Customer. And if you want something, open up a ticket. So in the project plan, you almost need like a 500 line item project plan, but resource column will be SAP ticket, not a person.
Yeah, so I would say in that suggestion, if you have your 500 line project plan, as best you can, you try to find how many of them actually have a corresponding exact ticket that exists. Then when you figure out the ones that don't have the exact ticket, then that's where you start working with your project team to say, hey, how do we get these particular tasks done? Because I think that they've tried to do is really they've commoditized it so that the things that they're really responsible for, they already have a ticket. So in that case, you have to be very careful for those tasks that don't have a ticket. It's probably your responsibility.
Okay. That makes sense.
Right. You mentioned, Andrew, about testing somewhere in the last, and I think it's a key topic because customers migrating, organizations migrating to SAP RISE, they are responsible for application configuration, integration, process validation, data validation, everything out there. There may be some validation and testing that SAP will do, like, I don't know, load balancing or backups and things like that. But anything on SAP side, that stays with the customer responsibility. And I think it's key to underscore the effort of a migration and validating all the interfaces and doing a functional validation as well.
I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I would think that I think RISE is going to get you 80% there, meaning you're going to get your core S4 system. It's going to be moved from A to B. It's going to be on RISE. It's going to be operating. It's going to be functioning. It's going to be a copy of whatever you need it to be if it's brownfields. It's going to be ready to use up to about 80%, for example. The next 20% is where, yes, you need to start saying, hey, this is S4 and that's done. Okay, now do I have upstream applications? I have downstream applications. I need to connect these. Yes, you need to do that. Hey, I need to access the system. And then typically in my environment, if I'm a brownfields, I might have SSO. We need to set that up because, that's not, that's not the core. The core has already been provided to you. So you need to make sure that you figure out all that peripherals to say, yes, that's what needs to be done. That last 10 or 20% to make everything work so that it's business operational. We're not talking about the configuration part. We're assuming that configuration of S4 is already done, not the business process is done, but it's not complete because it doesn't work with all the tie-ins to everything else. So that's where, from a customer's perspective, you got to say, yeah, I got to take it that the last mile to get everything all connected so we can actually use it. And I think that's as long as you understand that that's your responsibility, because I think if you think of it from an SAP responsibility, how would they know what system it needs to connect to? Where is it? Is it a cloud solution or is it your third-party system? Where does the data get consumed later? They can't know that. So the misconception, I think, is we think SAP is going to know when I say I want to migrate my system, they will know everything. Unless you have an SI, and I think they have clearly mentioned that they may want an SI involved if you're bringing a lot of S4 and all its friends in there. You need an SI to help you, or at least a strong project team on the customer side that understands all of it. I think that's from my point of view.
Yeah, so I would summarize this a tip here, an 80-20 rule. If we all know the 80-20 rule, right? So I think my thought in this is that for the 20% of the items on the project plan, just plan for those to be 80% of your effort and time, because those are not standard issue tickets that you can just open and get it done. It may be something that's in a gray zone, something that's not defined, understood, or maybe need a lot of your own work. So I think just don't take the project plan and say, oh, I only have 20% left to do, but actually that 20% is actually the the iceberg theory, right? That's the stuff at the bottom that is hiding most of the work so I think if you look out for that scenario, I think you'll be okay. And as long as somebody knows what they want and how to get it, I think that's probably will address that.
That's where 80%, exactly. That 20% is where 80% of the customer's effort is going to be. The 80% of the RISE that's what SAP's focus is on, right? So that's the thing that's a really great summary of that. So then the expectation of who's doing what.
So with that, it brings to me, and may spend a couple of minutes on tools. So integration seems like equals to additional tools that need to be installed as well, because of interfaces, because of single sign-on, because of encryption keys, or whatever, you name it, right? What is your experience with that on bringing additional tools? Are organizations and companies going to be more restricted to their existing application infrastructure because now they are in SAP RISE instead of being SAP on AWS? Or is it just the same level of support, everything that was supported on SAP on AWS or SAP on-premise is now being supported in SAP RISE? So whatever licenses, software you had, that's still going to work? Or I'm thinking on, any software that needs to be installed on the SAP servers, obviously.
Like SFTP or something like that, bank transfer or something.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think you got to look at it from, if I look at it in SAP's shoes, and I say, okay, I'm gonna host this in an environment, and we know the 50,000 customers that are out there that have all the different variations of tools that plug into to S4 and the different compatibility. that's not going to be possible, right? So I think it's just too much. So even coming down to SSO, there's a couple ways that they're going to do that. VPN connectivity, there's a couple ways that they're going to do that. They can't offer everything, right? So I think one of the key things in part of the early parts of the project when you do the analysis, I think, is really sending them basically all the information when they do the analysis, sending to the team all the interfaces and tools that you use, down to the level of I use VPN X, I use Citrix or whatever, I use SSO, I use how do I do it? I use 509. You need to tell them all that information so that you could highlight and say, oh, that part is something that they can handle, or that part is something that you may look at saying, that's a problem. We start needing to look at how we can change that to fit that, or is that in the pipeline for SAP to allow that type of access, that type of tool to be installed on or compatible with. So I think that the more that you can inventory it, and that the problem is having that inventory, and not everybody has that full inventory that relates to running an SAP system due to maturity for brownfields and due to immaturity from a greenfields. Either way, nobody has it all inventoried down to every single solution that touches it and how it works. So I think if that can be done, you can then anticipate and try to plan out what that impact might be. So
that brings to another question: is in SAP RISE, will all my data be in dedicated infrastructure? Is my SAP instances in a dedicated infrastructure, even if it's a virtual machine? Or is all shared and my HANA database is shared with somebody else's HANA database? Is there I don't think we cover that. And now coming with installation of tools and anything like that.
It's a private cloud, so it's yours.
It's a private cloud. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. Just happen to be hosted by a hyperscaler, and that's important to understand, because I think when we all said and done here, part of the cloud is that it's always the security of the cloud is responsibility of the provider of the cloud, or in this case, SAP is responsible for the infrastructure security, and then security of on the cloud is your application. You need to manage your own user IDs and how you want people to authenticate and turn on single sign-on. That's your responsibility, right? So I think that's a kind of a shared security model, because it's important. The only thing I don't know at this stage, implementation, you have to decide this not after the fact. We have cases where customer on the cloud hosted by somebody, but it's a zero trust environment, meaning that I could sell this company or divest this company next day, and I need to turn over the encryption key or whatever the master key is to that new company, a new owner, divest. In this particular case, I think it's a little bit more intricate, because you're not in charge. The customer, typically in this case, they call it bring your own key. You can't bring your own key and tell SAP. At least I'm not aware. In a typical cloud, you can bring your own key. And then Azure or GCP or AWS, even though they are hosting your infrastructure, they have no access to your data. They can't see it because you have your own key. In this case, I don't know who has the key. And it seems like SAP say they are infrastructure security. But if you want to bring your own key, I don't know. Maybe that's another one where you're doing the planning for the project, need to think about not just the application security, but encryption, right? We just heard recently, yesterday's news was that all of the big casino, MGM, Caesar Palace in Vegas was actually had ransomware issue.
The key you are talking about is the key at database level, or which kind of key?
It's the database level is a built-in key.
It's out of scope, yes.
But you can have a key. So on let's say on a VM in Azure or on AWS EC2, you can have a customer key, right? A KMS key management system that you bring your key. You don't have to use default key from AWS, because let's say what happened if the government want AWS to turn over your system data. If you control the key, nobody's gonna read it, right? So that's the concept, is zero trust. So anyway, I think that's a little bit off topic. I think we need to get back to the main.
All right. Well, it's been an awesome conversation today. Implementation is a really key topic. A lot of going on during that phase, and I think we can still uncover a lot more stuff for implementation. So
we'll cover operations next. Is that next topic? Is operation? We'll have an episode.
I think it's, after successful implementation, that comes operation. So
okay.
I think
all right.
Great.
This has been great, guys. A very, very in-depth and very articulating conversation with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.